What is up, you radical human? Today on the show, I had the wonderful Dr. Marley Quinn, and we had a fun conversation that kind of went all over within the realm of holistic living. So, Marley takes us on her journey of going to pursue a career in conventional medicine, but then pivoting to holistic chiropractic care to follow more of her intuition and less of the dogma of the system. She explains why, if your doctor doesn't at least ask you about your lifestyle and is quick to give you a pill, you don't really have a doctor, you have a drug dealer. She invites us to explore whether women's physiology is really cut out for the modern 9 to 5 landscape. She details her journey from veganism to something like an animal-based diet or instinctive eating, very different from intuitive eating. It's safe to say that Dr. Marley has changed her mind a lot over the course of her health journey. And that's my question for you this week. Answer in the comments below, either on YouTube or Spotify. What's the one thing that you've changed your mind on the most on your health journey? Expect to learn about how love and connection is integral on one's health journey, and whether Dr. Marley thinks yoga is demonic and compatible with a Christian path. Like I said, a fun one. Let's get into it with Marley Quinn. Marley, I wanted to kick this one off with a quote from you that I pulled from your Instagram. You said, "When I started living holistically, I seemingly lost 30 pounds overnight and almost all the inflammation just fell off my body." That's a pretty big claim. Where was that? Where did your path into holistic living come from? And what did that look like for you when you first got started?
Wow, great question. I would say it started consciously when I was in college. So I went to university thinking I was going into pre-med, I want to be a medical doctor, and I just remember sitting in a pharmacology class thinking this is not what I believe to be true. We were talking about
Mm,
antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, and I really just I'll never forget the day. I just was sitting there and just completely zoned out of the lecture because I did not believe to be in alignment with this idea that pharmaceuticals are the way out of all mental health issues. And so from there, I just kind of started digging deeper, and I knew nutrition definitely played a role in things. I think from a very young age, probably 12 years old, I was very conscious about what I ate.
mm,
And looking back, I would say it was a bit of disordered eating. But I was never trying to be rail thin. I just wanted to be healthy. And I tried keto and I tried paleo and I did carb cycling and I tried veganism and all sorts of different diets. And so that was kind of the first thing that really showed me, okay, it's more than pharmaceuticals that play a role in your health. And you can absolutely alter your health with inputs more than just pharmaceuticals. And so then in college, I mean, that was kind of my wild phase. I was drinking and I was staying up and I was partying and I was not prioritizing my health. And that's when I gained quite a bit of weight, and I think also a bit of emotional weight because I was just living so out of tune with, I
mm.
mean, the way I live now, which is in alignment with nature and God. And so yeah, I guess this is kind of a long-winded answer, but after that, I just started adapting different things in my life more than just nutrition, but
Right.
also really prioritizing sleep and learning more about sunlight. And I then decided, okay, I don't want to be a medical doctor. What am I going to do instead? Because I knew I still wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to further my education beyond just university. And so I somehow, I think it was just God. Um, I just got this idea that I wanted to be a chiropractor, and I had never seen a chiropractor before in my life. I had never been to a
Hmm.
chiropractor. I enrolled in chiropractic school. I got accepted, and I was packing up my car to go, and I still had never been to a chiropractor. But I looked at the syllabus and just the information online, like a sample schedule, and I was like, this is exactly the stuff I want to be learning about. Like, I want to be learning about obstetrics through a holistic lens. And so
Hmm.
then chiropractic school just kind of blew my mind open, because I came to chiropractic school as a vegan thinking that that's what was healthy. And it was right around then that I lost 30 pounds just from switching to, now that I've read more of the Bible, what I would call a biblical diet, eating
Mm.
meat and milk and honey and eggs and fruits, and just living in tune with nature.
It's a really fascinating juxtaposition in many ways because I know you've said in the past, which I thought was really interesting, if your doctor doesn't ask you about lifestyle and just wants to put you on a pill, you don't really have a doctor, you have a drug dealer. And that's kind of what the cultural model of health, and I air quote that because it's not health, is it? That's obviously sick care, and the system is so corrupt. But to bounce from that into chiropractic is a really interesting one because I understand it a lot, and we use it in our family, and we've had a bunch of chiropractors on the show. But it's almost poo-pooed by the conventional model of health, right? Like the doctors are the gods in our culture. Chiropractors, they're kind of like, oh yeah, they're the people that weren't smart enough to make it, or they just want to take the easy way out. But it's funny because you clearly are leaning into something here that was much more intuitive and less about the system or academia. What is it that fundamentally resonated with you more about the chiropractic versus the classical medical model of health? Was it just more of this holistic vision, the focus of the whole human instead of just the obsession with pushing pills?
Yeah, I would say it was a couple of things. So interestingly enough, and I didn't realize this until I was approaching going to chiropractic school. But chiropractors are licensed to be primary care physicians, which is something I did not even comprehend or understand. It's something I'd never heard before because, kind of like you said, our society just poo-poos chiropractors, which that's a whole other interesting conversation. Like, why don't people know that you can see a chiropractor as a
Right.
primary care? That's a weirdly hidden fact. But I was looking at a sample schedule for chiropractic school, and a side by side of a chiropractic course load versus medical school, it's literally the same. We take the same classes. There's 4 sections to our board exams, and the first 2 to 3 sections are very similar to that of a medical doctor. However, we learn the same pathologies, but the treatment is different. So with
Yeah.
chiropractic, it's only holistic treatments. We have one class on pharmacology, and it's actually called, interestingly enough, toxicology, because you're putting in
Hmm.
toxins to your body. I mean, like, right, like side effects they're just effects. They're not side effects. They are effects of
Right.
a toxin that you're putting in your body. Yes, it may help treat something, but so when I saw that side by side of like, it is the same, you're learning about the same pathologies and the same things going, the same anatomy, the same thing going on in the human body. The only difference is the philosophy behind how to treat the human body. And I think that that's what really drew me in with chiropractic, because the foundational chiropractic principle is the power that made the body heals the body.
Yes.
Everyone has that, the innate intelligence. And I just didn't hear that in the medical paradigm. And I mean, up until through my college experience, I was still seeing medical doctors. And honestly, every single time I went to see one, it did not help my situation at all. I had mono in college, and they prescribed me an antibiotic, which anyone that knows that mono is a virus cannot be treated with antibiotics. We're just antibiotic crazy in this culture. I tore my
Hmm.
ACL. I was told by a medical doctor I would never run again if I didn't get their surgery. I never got the surgery. I'm running just fine. So I just had events happen in my life where I just was like, this is not the philosophy that I can, in good conscience, project onto patients. And I
Yeah.
think that that's really what drew me closer to chiropractic.
Yeah, I've always liked this frame of when pain becomes purpose almost, that you unfortunately have to go through a few, smack across the chops by life or some, ill-advised events or advice to go like, actually, I don't want anything to do with that. And especially in the position that you was wanting to be in, which was patient-centered care, that there's a different way. And I never knew that juxtaposition either between like the kind of it's really in the treatment where it differs. The etiology is somewhat the same, right? Like dis-ease is manifesting through various inputs, whether it's our food or our lifestyles. But because of the treatments in the classical model, it's basically just match a pill with a symptom, and it doesn't have enough time to really get into nuance. Whereas the chiropractic paradigm is more about root cause centric healing, not just through food, right? But through all these other things like body systems, emotions, environmental toxins. Um,
Yes.
you said when you went into that you was a vegan, and you spent a pretty good time as a vegan, right? What was the straw that broke the camel's back to awaken you to something more like an animal-based ish or red meat centered diet, and how do you live now? So yeah, 2 questions there. Like, what kind of woke you up to the vegan myth or the propaganda, and kind of how do you build your food philosophy these days?
Yeah, I was vegan for probably about 5 years. I mean, I would say
Mm.
vegan slash vegetarian, but teetering into veganism quite a bit. And let's see, it was my second year of chiropractic school, and my roommate, who's now Dr. Margarita Brini, she had the Raw Farms raw kefir in the fridge. She had cut up raw beef liver in the freezer. She was living this, I guess, animal based lifestyle. I mean, before it was,
Right.
whatever it's called. And she just constantly challenged me in the best way, to really evaluate what I was eating. And so first it started with the seed oils, because I would like crack open my bowl of hummus and I would eat that. And she was like, there's sunflower oil. What are you doing? Like, at the very least, if you're going to be vegan, like, don't eat this. These
Hmm.
seed oils are bad. And she really opened my eyes to so many things. I think at least like just started the evolution in me. And she had me try raw kefir one day. And the first time I tried it, I absolutely hated it. And I was not sold. It was sour and tangy. And now
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite foods, which is so funny. Yeah. And so I think just like little by little, and honestly, I've said this before, I think the most based people in the world, the highest concentration of base people, is at Life West Chiropractic College. Like, all the people, they're trying all the things. They're eating animal based. They're out in the sun. They're not wearing shoes. No one wears shoes to classes. I mean, it's
Hmm.
just, and so I think just being in that environment kind of like slowly, it's still a process. And I'm still learning things, that, aren't good for us, or,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, that evolution started a few years ago. And now this past year I started reading the Bible. I'm on this Bible in a year plan. And it's been so interesting because within the first few books of the Bible, it talks about what humans are supposed to eat, and what God has kind of told us is for us to eat. And so I've recently been basing my food choices off of that. But I will say I spent a lot of my life, I was reflecting on this Thanksgiving, because a bunch of different families come together. People bring dishes and have different methods of cooking and different ingredients that they use. And this is one of the first Thanksgivings where I didn't ask any questions about any ingredients. I feel like I'm now at a place where, yes, I center most of my food around pasture raised organic meat, dairy, raw dairy, fruits, in season fruits, not as many vegetables, honey, eggs. But at the same time, when there's an event like Thanksgiving, I just have complete food freedom. There's no questions
Mm.
asked. I'm just going to eat it and enjoy it. And I think my relationship with God has deepened in the sense that, the power that made the body heals the body, and any food that I put into my body is going to nourish it, so long as that is my intention with consuming it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I know what foods make me feel best. Like, eating a quote unquote animal based diet makes me feel best, but I literally do not sweat the small stuff. Like, if there's, you know, what did we had this like mint ice cream cake, and the ice cream is probably from the store and has carrageenan in it or whatever, but I don't even need to know. I don't even need to know. Like, I'm sharing it
Yeah.
with people that I love. And yeah, I'm just, my relationship with food is becoming more and more tapped into just how it makes me feel, whether that's sharing it with other people or in my own home. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought this up. It's been one of my personal evolutions too, particularly over the last few years. This combating the unhealthy obsession with health,
Yes.
orthorexia, and I've
Yes.
started to lean much more in this direction too, that I come to palpably understand that the stress of trying to be perfect is much more damaging than the imperfections themselves. And
Right.
that whilst a food might have low quality ingredients and might not be quote unquote optimal and might not be part of my regular diet plan, that in the context of the larger scheme of life and the thousands, tens of thousands of meals I'll have over the course of a lifetime, that if, grandma's pumpkin pie has seed oils in it and a graham cracker crust with gluten, it's really not the end of the world. It's one meal out of thousands, and that, you can relax a little bit and not get so stressed about it. But it's hard. I feel like we have to almost go to that edge of like hyperfixation and control and orthorexia to come back to something like a balanced centered point. So I'm curious about how you think about this in the health space, being an educator, being an influencer, being somebody that's also on your own journey. How do you help people to understand like the unhealthy obsession with health is actually not healthy? That yes, you can have all of these boundaries and you need to honor them most of the time, but by doing it most of the time, you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room to also enjoy life too. It sounds like this has been more of a recent evolution in your thinking. How's that journey going for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I feel like this journey kind of kicked off consciously last almost 2 years ago when I did my yoga teacher training in India. I was at an ashram for a month and was eating the food that they were providing to us, which was
Oh,
vegetarian.
nice.
And yeah, and so I had no control over the food that I
Mm.
was eating. It was just, this is what you're eating. And of course it was, I mean, it was amazing food and it was cooked with the Ayurvedic principles. And but the dairy that they have, there's no raw regenerative dairy
No.
farm in India. Like, that's not where they're sourcing their paneer from. And I think that's when I really started to let go of, I mean, it was a whole evolution, that whole month of really assessing my relationship with food and what I believe to be true about what I'm eating. And um I mean, weight is such an obsolete thing, but we weighed ourselves at the beginning, at the end of the program, just because they did a whole vitals check. They did blood pressure,
Hmm.
weight, and they did that at the
Hmm.
beginning and the end to see what would happen. And I remember fearing, oh my gosh, I'm going to gain weight. Like, I'm eating food that is not good for me. And I had this fear that something was going to happen, bad was going to happen in my body. And I think over that month, it was a definitely some kind of death and rebirth into trusting what has been provided to me and realizing that there's not a certain way that you have to eat. There's no rules. It's just frameworks. And I think the most important framework is the one that is, if you honor and respect the food that you're eating, then it will nourish your body. And constantly checking in on, are you overeating? Are you undereating? Like, are you not eating enough because you're scared of the food, or are you overeating because this is an emotional response? And so, yeah, I think it's something that I have so many conversations, and it's still just kind of like its own evolution happening within me, and I'm not exactly sure where, if I've fully landed yet,
Right.
because every once in a while I do think, oh my gosh, well, if I did have an Oreo right now, that would not be good. But I think something that I have come to is this idea of, because I don't like the term intuitive eating.
Hmm.
Because to intuit is to use your mind, and that's something kind of exclusive to humans because we have, the prefrontal cortex. I prefer instinctive eating or
Mm.
innate eating, because intuitive, just by default, means that you're using your mind, and I think you should use your body more than your mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I started calling it, yeah, innate eating instead. Or yeah, because I just think it's something that you feel in your body, checking. It's a constant assessing your relationship with the food. Like, how is
That's
this
right.
making me feel? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think, what you're really pointing at here is mindfulness in all aspects of it, like really thinking about why am I choosing this, why am I craving this, why am I 6 bags of chips deep before I've even come online and been like, what am I eating away here, how am I trying to deal with stress in my life by finding it at the bottom of a sleeve of Oreos? And
Yeah.
I really do like that. I've always got the ick about intuitive eating, and I've never
Yeah.
really thought about that switch to instinctive eating or like human
Yes.
eating, something that's more alive within the animal and what the animal needs, the body, what it needs, as opposed to what the mind needs. Because the mind is where we get ourselves in trouble in all kinds of ways, right? In stories that we make up about things, I'm intuitively craving to consume and inhale a pint of Ben and Jerry's right now. That's what my intuition is telling me to do. But my instincts don't want that. It's my mind that wants that. So that's a really cool distinction, actually. And I think, that's a relationship. You have to develop it, right? You have to develop firstly the awareness of like watching yourself and being like, how interesting that I repeat these patterns. How much, speaking of the yoga thing, how much of that influenced your training of like greater self-awareness, not just through the body but also through the mind? Because it's a wonderful practice that I got a lot from in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it opened my eyes to so much. And I think it's so interesting because I think chiropractic and yoga actually go together so well. Like learning about things at the yoga school. I mean, it's all just about alignment and spinal
Right.
health and obviously, diving into Kundalini, which is a subset of yoga is, I mean, it's all about the energy flowing throughout your body, but also your spine. And I think, yeah, it definitely deepened my practice of self-awareness. And I'm still, I would say in this past year, it's so funny. I get DMs and comments from people when they find out I got certified teaching yoga. It's a subset of Christians that are like, how could you do this? Like, this is
Demonic.
demonic. This is, yeah. And it's so funny because I had never heard that. Like, I had never even heard that concept that yoga is demonic before.
Mm,
I would get these comments, but I will say, I mean, I understand what people are saying. And I would say, like, I have since shifted my mindfulness from a more yogic framework to a God centered framework. And
hmm
but at the same time, I think that they do go hand in hand. Like it's all the same thing, but we're just expanding the lens through which we're looking at it. So,
hmm
yeah, I was definitely deep into yoga for a while. I would say recently, I still use some principles, but I find more mindfulness and awareness and expansion through, I guess, Christianity, but there's so many connotations to that word that
Yes, yeah.
yeah, just my
It's funny
relationship
that
with
you like cut me off at the pass because that's exactly where I was going, knowing that you've stated you've been on more of like a biblical journey this last year and trying to merge these seemingly contrasting worlds between the East and the West. And, I'm wearing a t-shirt here with the yin and yang on it, and that's obviously like derived more so from Eastern philosophy. But in the same sense, it's all God, like all is of or nothing is. And we have these conceptual frameworks that I think are it's important to find what's useful to us, not get too bogged down sometimes with what is true, like capital T truth, and like I hold the truth or this is the truth, and
it.
more
Yeah.
like is it useful? Because a lot of the times what we end up doing then is just disagreeing in a sense that there is obviously a truth to the world, and I think some of us believe that that this is the way, and other people believe this is the way, and it's fine. But what we perceive personally as our truth is probably a misnomer. It's more just like how we're interacting with the capital T truth. And there's different paths up the mountain, right? And some people, they go yogic, and some people, they go Christian. And some people end up in the middle of both of them. Like, what's the similarities here and what are the differences? And can I practice this without being called demonic by my Christian friends? And hopefully just, trying to muddle through all of that can get complex. But as long as we do it with
Yeah.
love, we'll be all right, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I will say, something that really, a book that I read that bridged the gap is called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Myss, Myss. And she goes through all of the 7 chakras and then relates them to Christian sacraments. She also
Hmm.
relates them to maybe something in Judaism as well. She relates it to another religion as well, but that was really expansive in the sense of, because I learned about the chakras. I love the chakras. I think it's a great framework for looking
Yeah.
at light and shadow and different themes that go on and challenges in our life. And I think that you can absolutely have that with Christianity. And so I loved that book. It really helped bridge the gap because I think it's just, yeah, like you said, it's all the same stuff, but how we're looking at it and talking about it is just, some things maybe more resonant for people than
Right.
others.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna get way out over my skis here because I don't really proclaim any religion per se. I do feel like I'm that classic guy now that's like, I'm spiritual, not religious, and you're like, yeah, pick a side, buddy. Like, what are you doing sitting on the fence? But I'm trying to figure it out, right? I think like God is a really big question, and a really big a really big, small word. You know, it's 3 letters, but it's like the biggest word in our vocabulary. And I've
Yeah.
just tried to like think about all of these overlapping things. And what I learned recently blew my mind. So, you know, in the Christian theological view of the world, like there's original sin, right? The man has fallen and we are sinners. But if you actually track the word sin down, it's from the Greek, and it actually is like an archery term, which means like to miss the target, to miss the mark. So it's an
Mm,
interesting flip of perspective that sin doesn't necessarily mean like we are bad people, that maybe the condition of original sin is to literally miss the mark, which would be to say to miss the point, which is all to do with the mind. And then you go to the East and it's like the world is Maya, the mind is Maya. It's all confusion. And then the Christian view has the path to enlightenment is through salvation, which is to escape the mind, to tap into something like Christ consciousness. And in Buddhism, it might be to escape the wheel of samsara and to become enlightened. And then there's Christ consciousness, there's Buddha consciousness. And I'm like, I think there's a lot more that these things and these theological views of the world agree on than disagree on. But it just like, that's kind of where I'm at with it. Is just like, this is really fascinating. And I feel like, again, as long as you're trying to live godly and act good and do good and leave the world better than you found it, and if you have a relationship to the divine, which I would ultimately say is the great mystery, that there's got to be at least an ounce of vulnerability under that and surrender to the fact that none of us actually know, like concrete, like I could knock on this table. It's at the end of the day, it's the biggest mystery of life, and we'll all get to find out one day when we expire. And you know, hopefully you get to say, yes, I was right, or oh shit, I got that one wrong. And maybe we come back, or maybe we stay there, or maybe we go down there, and it might be messy, but hey, it's quite a journey, and there's a lot to that question of God.
absolutely. No, I could not agree more. And I think any sacred text, like the conclusion I have come to, because you also hear people say, I saw this reel that was like, if you say all religions are saying the same thing, then you don't understand the point of Christianity. But I just would challenge that, because I think all romance novels are saying the same thing. They're just different. Like they're just different
Hmm.
stories. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, like what it is a human account of a metaphysical thing. Like that is what all the sacred texts are. Like even the Bible, it's like all it is a human's account of some metaphysical spiritual encounter. Like,
Hmm.
but that's
Hmm.
every spiritual text. Like they all are the same thing, in that they all are humans just trying to describe an indescribable thing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
There's ACDC's tour manager. I think his name was Brian Johnson. Like, of all people to come up with this profound statement, said something like, God is the name for the blanket that we throw over the mystery to give it shape. I was like, wow,
Yes.
that's profound. That guy's probably done a lot of psychedelics or something. Like, that was really good. Because yes,
Right.
at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's just crazy. I do fundamentally, personally feel and believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, not the other way
Yeah.
around. I do think that consciousness consciousness is fundamental to existence, not that we just have consciousness because we evolved and had brains. That like consciousness is the prima materia, that it like created life, and consciousness might be synonymous with God and all of that stuff. But these are fun conversations, I think, because what I can clearly see culturally happening is people coming back to religion. There's a Christian revival in this country, in America right now in
There is.
particular.
Yeah.
And it's probably because the values that were espoused, and this is an interesting segue into getting into like modern femininity and the modern myth of progressivism and all of
Yeah.
that stuff. It's a failed experiment. It is currently failing, and we know it's failing because people aren't happy. We were told that basically materialism was the new God. That's what Nietzsche meant when he said like God is dead and we've replaced him. And it's like this worship of things and money and status and games. But if that was technically true, we'd be thriving as a people, because even the people with the lowest incomes and things like that still have more than any person previously in our history could have ever imagined. So we've got the
Yeah.
materials, yet we are depressed and suicidal and infertile and self-conscious. So it's not working. The collective myth that we've got right now is not working, and it's awakening something in people that's saying like, well, what's a better myth? Well, we might want to try this like religious stuff that people have been banging on about for a few thousand years, because it seems to be rooted in some really good morals. So there's clearly something here, and I think we're all just, as Ramdas used to say, we're all just trying to walk each other home at the end of the day and trying to find the right way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of progress, speaking of modernity versus, the more ancestral lens of things, you've been speaking out quite a bit and raising your voice in this space of kind of like modern feminism is a bit of a myth, a bit of a bait and switch, that women aren't really designed to be like slotted into this 9 to 5 life. Say more about your evolving thought process on that.
Yeah. I To start, I think women should do whatever they want to do. I also think that women have been led to believe, or led to want something that they never innately would have wanted. Um, to take it back, I would have considered myself a feminist in college, because, yeah, I woke up and I was like, I don't understand, why there are differences between men and women. We should all be equal. Um, and now, granted, when I had this perspective, I still probably would have said, well, women shouldn't get drafted for war, though. And I think since then, I have had this whole evolution, especially learning about women's hormonal health. There are innate differences between male and female. Just our chromosomes are innately different. We have XX and XY. Like, to say that we're equal and the same is like, well, that's just not true. And so learning more about the menstrual cycle and women's hormonal cycle, I was realizing that, okay, this cadence for life is what I'm learning is healthy for women, is different than the actual cadence that I've been living and that most women are living, which is, let's just call it the corporate 9 to 5 or your
Right.
regular 9 to 5.
Which,
And
sorry to interrupt, would it be
yes,
safe to say that's more of like a masculine adopted paradigm? Because I think that the differences in cycle is really profound, right? That men's cycles, if we want to call it that, are basically a 24-hour period, and women's
yes,
cycles are 28 days.
yes,
And the
yeah,
work life, the corporate beast, is a 24-hour cycle. It's basically clock in, go, go, go. Maybe you get a couple of days off of the weekend, but just keep going, honey.
yeah. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And so, Henry Ford, not Harrison Ford, Henry Ford, that's the car guy, right?
Not
Henry
Obi-Wan.
Ford,
No, not the guy that drives the Millennium Falcon.
yes, created the 40-hour work week. And so, okay, this work week was created by a man. And okay, let's not just throw it out because it was created by a man, but let's be clear, this was designed by a man. And at the time, most people in the workforce were men. So there's that. So now, flash forward to 2025, we have women working this corporate 9 to 5, following this cycle that was created and designed by a man for men, basically, is what I'm going to say. And just to your point of this corporate 9 to 5 is masculine. I mean, it is, because the male hormone cycle is on a 24-hour cycle. And that is the 9 to 5. It's the same every day, 24 hours, versus the female hormone cycle is 28 days, which means you push harder and rest longer at different times in your cycle. And so realizing this, and then realizing I'd never been taught this until, basically chiropractic school, but even in chiropractic school, they just kind of glazed over it. I mean, we talked about the nuts and bolts of the female hormone cycle, but obviously it's not an anthropological course. We didn't really talk about the societal effects of this. It just was like, here's the female hormone cycle. And I think since then I've kind of extrapolated a bit more to realize, okay, if this is actually how our hormones work, why are we living like this?
Yeah.
And there's all this rave of cycle syncing. And that's something that I talk about quite a bit, because I was working out. This also played a role in the losing 30 pounds, was cycle syncing, like actually tapping into femininity and living like a woman's body should live, or wants to live hormonally. I was trying to PR in the gym, at all at any time in my cycle.
Right.
There was no reverence at all for the shifts in my hormones, and I was going out to run, and I ran a marathon, and I just trained for months and was just pushing and pushing and pushing, um and now where I'm at is I'm the healthiest I've ever been because I am living in a more in sync
Yeah.
hormonally paradigm. Yeah.
I mean, it totally makes sense, right? Speaking here as a guy, obviously, with a lack of nuance for what it actually feels like to live in a body that has such distinct phases. But I heard I'm blanking on the name now, but I heard a female MMA fighter talking about this recently. So these are top tier athletes, right? They get the date gets picked. All right, you are going to fight on January 25th. Where does the cycle consideration come in for that? Because what if that's in your X phase that is not the moment where you want to go, punch another chick's head off her shoulders, right? You want to like cuddle up on the couch. So she was saying, obviously, that impacts things like how hard it is to cut weight for that competition. So what's the solution? Well, you could just get on birth control, right? Because now you can control it. Now you've got it like more, you get the chemical castration side of things, and at least it's predictable. But that's just trading, one problem for another one that has all this other cascade of biological problems. And, we could wax philosophical about the example given here anyway, that women are fighting in a cage. And that does seem quite masculine, doesn't it? But everybody's down to do whatever they want to do. And some of these women are incredibly skilled badasses. And I wouldn't want to
Totally.
get in the cage with them. But
Yeah.
that's where we end up, right? Is like, oh, well, this then, meaning female physiology, is a problem. It's a problem, and it doesn't match with this world that we have to live in. So here are the solutions. And it's the pill, and it's just shut up and work a little bit harder and ignore your body. And, cycle syncing's a myth. What are these are just a bunch of hippies talking about nonsense. Just get on with it, have a cup of tea, pop a Tylenol, and you'll be sweet. And it's just like, it's crazy to me to think about, but it must be very frustrating to be a woman in this world sometimes and be like, why is nobody talking about this?
Yeah. I mean, it's just I get this from my patients a lot too, because they'll come in with hormonal issues, or they'll come in with an issue that they don't even realize is hormonal. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just sit down and talk about this. And, they're at the ripe age of 35 and have never heard about this before, didn't even know that there were phases to their cycle. And I think in that sense,
Mm,
right, because I think there's some feminists that are fighting for women to have this information, right? It's not like, oh, women are equal. Like, what we're fighting for
right.
is like women to have this information. And I'm
Yes, yes.
totally in support of that, because yes, in certain regards, it is frustrating ish to live in a society that has no regard for the
Right.
female hormonal cycle. Um, and yeah, it's something that we're not taught in schools. And so really, honestly, like what I'm calling for is a revolution. Like we're going to have to start teaching
Mm,
this in schools at a young age. And I'll get comments that are like, "Oh, well, it's just not realistic to, center our society around the female hormonal cycle." And it's just like, well, maybe we need a revolution because or some sort of thing. And we don't even have to center society around it, but hey, let's teach young
consider it at
girls.
least.
Like,
Right.
yes, like let's just educate. I'm not saying out with the 9 to 5, burn it all down. I'm not saying that. But I do think that there are ways that as a society we could better support femininity. And in the same breath, there's ways we could better support masculinity.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's again, it's kind of, it's a bigger emblematic problem of the lack of mindfulness piece that we were talking about with our own personal journeys with food or social media consumption or whatever it is.
Yeah.
If a culture just operates blindly doing what it's always done and then expecting to have radically different results, it's foolish. It's just not going to happen, right? And I
Right.
think that we should be more open to ideas or conversations around switching things up, breaking down the system and rebuilding it, revolution, those evocative words, because it's not working. Modernity is not working. I mean,
Right.
if you zoom out from a far enough level, people will be like, but it is, we have less this and we have less that. And, more people are dying now from obesity than starvation. And we've solved a lot of problems. But in complex systems, when you solve one problem, you usually create another one. And as they say in the Bible, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So we're like, yeah, we've solved a lot of base level survival problems and provided a good level of comfort for people. But the cost of that, like societal comfort, has come at all of these other hidden expenses, like mass hormonal dysregulation that you must see in abundance of clients. Talk about the infertility crisis, talk about the population crisis. That's one I get attacked for online all the time, because I talk about the collapse of the population and the replication rate. And people are like, what are you talking about, dude? There's 8 billion people. There's too many people. I'm like, yes, but look at the reproductive rates in all of developed countries. They're dropping off a cliff. And I think that's partly a health conversation, but it's partly a cultural conversation too, because women are starting childbearing years later because they've been pushed into the workforce because A, they either need to, because most households now need a two-person income because it's bloody impossible to live off one-person income anymore. And B, that they've been kind of sold the myth of like, hey, you don't need to just be a mom. Why don't you go and compete with the boys? Why don't you be a girl boss? Why don't you be a CEO? Why don't you go and do all of that? So there's just a lot here, and I'm really interested in having these conversations, especially with female counterparts, because I obviously have my perspective of it. I am a terribly oppressive man who retired my wife and made her a stay-at-home mom, and when I say things like that, that gets people all kinds of triggered. Yet she's like, I have the best job in the world. I raise our two boys. I couldn't be happier doing that, and I feel really prideful about that. But at the same time, you know, to some people, it's like, oh, it's disgusting. Like, it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There is so much here. And I think yeah, as far as the like, why don't you be a girl boss and go compete with the boys? I had this reflection when I was driving a few months ago that truly women are not primed to cultivate family anymore. We go through the same schooling as boys. And so when I was in grade school and when I was in high school, like it was kind of like the next step is go to college. And then when you're in college, the next step is go get a job or go to more school. Like literally from the youngest age, the only option that was projected onto me for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week was fit into the system, turn in your homework, do things this way, and then you'll get into college and then do those things in college and then you'll get a corporate job. Like just when I was reflecting, I'm like, not once did anyone ever ask me like, do you want to learn about fertility? Do you want to learn about having children, about being a good wife, about being a good mother? Didn't learn any of that. And so I think there's something to be said about it's like, well, women don't really have options when the only thing that we're kind of, and I'm going to use the word brainwashed into is being a cog in this corporate wheel. Like that is literally what the public school system is. And again, like I say, I think women should do whatever they want to do. But when you've been told from 3 years old or 5 years old, however old you are when you go into public school, that this is how life is, it's just ridiculous to me that women think that they have a choice because they don't.
Right. Yeah, it's not in their lens of awareness, right? And
Yeah.
it's like you're familiar of the analogy of the Trojan horse, like you sneak something that's really inside of this pretty packaging. So it's been branded as, you know, female empowerment, right? But really what it has done is serve the corporate machine, because we did move, like you said, when the workplace was being established and this idea of a 9 to 5, it was very much a brawn-based economy. It required muscles and strength and moving things. And as we've gotten increasingly technocratic, it's less of a brawn-based economy now and more of a brain-based one. And women are at least men's equals when it comes to the brains. Like, you're really
Yeah.
smart. I would argue a lot smarter. So now all of a sudden there's this corporate giant growing in the background that says, wait a minute, we can put more butts in seats instead of having these women all be at home raising babies, if we, you know, like, especially if we prop it up as empowerment. And I think there's conflicting truths that are there at the same time too, because there is an empowerment lens to this. Like, you don't have to go that far back in our history where women were treated radically differently, unfairly, a lot of the time at the hands of men. And we do need to kind of like acknowledge that. But you know, we just got to ask, is all of this progress really helping us? Is it, you know, are we just progressing for progress's sake and we've lost meaning of what that should actually mean, which is, I would say, something like choices, something like options, where you're describing what I think you summed up really beautifully as those options have almost been removed at the very least, and sometimes like denigrated as like, oh, that's just, you know, that's the old way, that's the oppressive way, like this is the new way, this is the future.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much there with that. And as far as the options, what I will say, even reflecting back on high school, like we had this home economics course, like where you could learn to sew and to cook.
Right, right.
But it was like a 4-weight class compared to calculus, which was a 6-weight. And
Hmm.
Harvard is only going to accept me if I take calculus instead of this thing. And so, again, as far as choices and options, we have already societally said learning to cook is less than finding
Right.
derivatives in calculus. And why are we saying this to people? And it's just I think this hierarchy of things that are better or worse, I mean, a lot of it stems from already what we're teaching in school. Or if you want to take a communication class, that's like learning how to talk to people and be in a relationship, that's less valuable than trigonometry or,
Mm,
and like it's already like fundamentally, it's like why are we weighting different classes, different things? I mean, it's as deep as that. And it just like is subconsciously, at least for me, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to learn how to cook, like, because that's not going to
yeah,
get me anywhere in life. I'm going to learn
that's
calculus,
right.
which is so funny because daily I cook. I have not used calculus once
No,
since high
no.
school. Like, that is such like the ironic thing that just like makes gotta make you laugh. Like, these things that we say are of less value are actually like the very fabric of our daily lives. Yeah.
That's yeah, it's so true. It's like more valuable in that paradigm. So if like status
Yeah.
is the paradigm and competing and higher education and more salaries, then in that sense, in that paradigm, these are quote unquote more valuable. But at the human paradigm, like, how are you thriving? How are your relationships? How is your emotional regulation? How are your real world skills? God forbid shit ever really did hit the fan and the grid was down. Do you know how to tend to the land and rear
Right.
animals and cultivate and clean water? Because all of those things are pretty much lost now, except for some like hippies like me and some elders out there. Nobody knows any of
Yeah.
that stuff anymore, but they'll know, the square root of Pythagorean theory. But when,
Yes.
when the rubber hits the road, it's like, okay, that's useless. What do you have? What skills do
Yes.
you have? And I guess from a health perspective here, and you would see this working with people clinically, like, I'm sure you've seen a lot of very intellectual, very smart, like very PhD boss baby that have lost their their intuitive sense to self and they actually those actual skills, like interpersonal skills, communication skills, connection with self skills, cooking skills, and that leads to these problems that have been actually caused by the myth of progressivism.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because at the very root of it, any dis-ease is, yeah, a divorce from you and nature. And so, yeah, the people that have gone further down into that rabbit hole of, I mean, bringing it back to materialism and worldly things, or even academia and intellectualizing everything, like, these are all things that they're useful tools, but to ground and identify in them instead of nature, in my humble opinion,
Yeah.
will always result in dis-ease,
Yeah.
because you cannot intellectualize your way out of dis-ease and you cannot buy your way out of dis-ease. Like,
No.
yeah.
You can't, because it's that's a lot of the time that's an internal problem, right? And you're trying to ram external solutions, medicine. You can't out supplement your way. You can't out live a pill your way out of fundamental disease and misalignment. It just doesn't work. Like, these things can help, providing your body with nutrition and lowering inflammation and micronutrients. They can all help, but you can still be, you could have the best diet in the world, but you can be deeply traumatized and alone and lonely and living out in the middle of nowhere, connected to no one, and you won't be healthy because you're a social animal and you need people. So like, there's obviously varying levels here. What I get cautious of here, and it's not my intention, I know it's not yours either, but when people hear something like this, it sounds like we're throwing all the baby out with the bathwater and saying like, well, these things are stupid and don't pursue them and they're useless. But of course you did pursue them and you got educated, and it's partly why what you do. So I guess the question is like, what is the solution in your paradigm then, to just like just see them as tools and adopt what is useful and leave the rest, and also have this other suite of holistic self development at the same time going on?
Mm. Wow, I've never contemplated this before. This is a great question. Yeah, it is funny because I did become a doctor. I did pursue these things.
Right, right.
Yeah. And here's what I will say though. when I was pursuing these things up through undergrad, it was always for me in service of, I don't know what to call it. I guess the corporate 9 to 5, like it was always in service of integrating into society the way society wants me to integrate. And when I went to chiropractic school, within the first year, my relationship with God blossomed, and I was now pursuing this thing to deepen my relationship
Mm,
with God. Like everything I was doing, learning about the anatomy, learning how amazing the human body is, like all to deepen my relationship with God and my relationship with other people. And so I think it doesn't matter what you pursue, so long as the intention is this to bring you into right relationship with other
mm,
people and with God and nature, or is it to bring you in right relationship with money and material and being the smartest person in the room, because who the fuck cares about that? Like I used to care about that. And my life was so empty because being the smartest person in the room at the end of the day puts you in competition with other people. And I was living a hell trying to do that and trying to be that. And now it's all in service of how can I be in right relationship with people and nature and God.
oh, that's good. Yeah, that's so well said. I think you're right. It's not about what you do, it's why you're doing it and what's driving it. And ultimately, asking yourself, what are you worshiping? Because even if you get the most staunch atheist, everybody worships something. Some people just
Yes.
worship intellect, some people just worship money or materialism. And I think that's really what the sucker is here. Like, what are you worshiping? If you're doing it to glorify your God-given talents and be of service in the world and glorify that, then it really doesn't matter what you do. You could be a bus driver, you could be a janitor, you could be a doctor, you can be a neurosurgeon, you could be an astronaut, like whatever. Just but because you're doing it from the right intention, right? If the intentions aren't pure, you can be successful in the modern view of the world. Like you can have millions of dollars in the bank and all of that stuff, but you can be spiritually sick. I heard a
Yes.
quote once that changed my worldview forever. It was something like, success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. And I would much rather
Yeah.
have the happiness than the success, and I think what that is the alignment piece that you're talking about, that I'm pursuing these
Yes.
things and I can be successful in these things, but I'll actually want the success because they're in alignment with who I am and my gifts and my purpose in the world.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I would also like to add an addendum to what I would say is girl bossing. That's great. And if it's in service of the greatest good, I think that that's wonderful. I think a common theme, and this is, I hate making generalizations, but I'm going to make a generalization. I think I see a lot of people trying to attain this girl boss status because they're trying to get closer to worldly things. They want the Prada bag, they want the trip to Italy, they want, like, I'm girl bossing so that I can have all these things.
Mm,
And at least with the men in my life, and maybe this is just like I said, this is a huge generalization, but I find that the men I've surrounded myself with, they want success and wealth literally so that their wife can stay home and raise kids. Like
mhm,
they're not wanting the Prada bag or the trip to Italy. Like the men that I've seen, they want all of these things and this wealth, and they want to be a part of the corporate America so that they can provide for their family.
mm.
Versus, I've just seen a lot of girl bossing being like, I don't need no man. I've got my Prada bag. I'm going to Italy. I'm on the Amalfi Coast with my Gucci glasses, whatever. Like, and I think that that's what has me worried because we've glorified
Right.
being a girl boss. I think if you want to be a girl boss, and like you can do whatever you want, but I just think the world is so much better when it's you're girl bossing in service of, like, it's all to the glory of God and all to, like, so that you can stay home with family. Like I
Yeah.
work a job so that I can fly home to see my family whenever I want. Like that is what it's in service of. And not that I'm here to say one thing is better than the other and that family is better than Prada bags, but I'm just going to say it in my mind. That's what's more important, because when you die, you can't take anything else with you.
There was some angry progressive lady banging the table right now at the fact that you'd think a child is more valuable than a Prada bag. What are you talking about,
I know.
Marley? You have been brainwashed by the trad wife movement.
Exactly. Exactly. So be it.
uh, It's I'm sure in all of our lives there's a bit of a selection criteria for the people that are in our lives by virtue of who we are. So it sounds like you're getting good representations of men that are trying to do things for the right reasons. But I will say, even like in men that are wrapped up in the more like materialistic lifestyle, it's still, if you there's like ultimate and proximate reasons for things, and basically like people think they want nice things, but really if you get to the core level of why men in particular want nice things, it's a show of status. It's a
Yes.
fancy cat big what okay, why do I want status? To attract a mate. Why do I want a mate? To have a family. So it
Yeah.
ultimately all kind of comes back to that. And I think, some men just become a little bit more conscious of it, and they're like, oh, this is what I am kind of like doing to sacrifice for, so I can hopefully provide that. And that's that really fulfilling for a man, because it activates that protector provider archetype within them, and I think that's really healthy. But yeah, I do see that trend, and I see it from a different lens, obviously being a man, but it just, I have to use the word give me the ick a little bit, because it does feel a bit icky, and it feels like a lot of that, by the way. And this might just be me pulling ideas out my bum, but it feels like a lot of that is intersexual competition. It feels like that's a lot of women competing with women. I don't think women are trying to get a Gucci bag to show off to men, because I don't think men give a shit about a Gucci bag. I wouldn't know if
Right.
my wife had a bag from Target or a bag from Louis Vuitton. I wouldn't know. That's
Exactly.
that's to impress other women, right?
Right. Yes, this is a really interesting point, and I think you're onto something because yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't have the slightest bit if she had slides from Walmart. Oh, what are the Louis Vuittons, Louis Vuittons, or whatever they're called?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
But her
Yeah.
friends would be like, "Oh wow, no, she's got the red soles. That must mean something. Wow, she's doing so good." And really
Yeah.
trying to switch probably from a competitive mindset to a collaborative mindset would be best for all of us. And because collaboration is the only way out of this shit show, I think. And that means loving
Yes.
each other, respecting each other, hopefully raising children in the process, because I do think, and I got in hot water online recently for this statement, which sounds so crazy, I guess, that I said, I'm not here to tell anybody what their purpose for their life is, but I think the purpose of life is probably something like to have children. Because if we don't have children, we don't even have a future to pontificate on the purpose of life, because life itself ends, at least human existence. And it just got a bunch of people riled up, like, oh, that's a ridiculous statement. We've gone so far beyond that. We've transcended these baseline instincts to just pass on our DNA and reproduce these clumps of cells. And that language to me is just like, wow, there are a lot of people that think like that out there, and it's really interesting to me. And I
Yeah.
wonder, if a lot of people that say those things are actually just, they're trying to do this bit of mental gymnastics where they are trying to teach themselves to not want what they couldn't get. And if you think about it from that sense, it's very heartbreaking, because really they might not have been able to find the right partner. They might be in a really dire situation where they haven't been able to transcend their own personal survival needs and reproduce and things. Like, they might have had infertility struggles that they didn't choose. Like, that's really heartbreaking. But I think sometimes when we have a hard truth that we haven't integrated in ourselves, we attack it when we see it out there in the world.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with that. And I would say that because I did not want marriage or children. I mean, through undergrad, like until I was in chiropractic school, even I just was like, and I had that very same mentality that you're just speaking of. Like, I just hadn't found a man that I resonated with. So I
Mm,
just was like, well, that must not be, that's not important. Like, I looked
yeah.
down on that. Which is so funny. Yeah, that you were saying all that. Cause I'm like, that is absolutely where I was. And in a lot of ways, you're right. It is heartbreaking. But I think, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just, I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah. Because if two people come together and they're like really mutually beneficial for one another's growth, they're complementary opposites in some ways, like that masculine provides the structure, the safety, the provider, the feminine creates that life force energy and that fun and that emotion and that joy, and they come together, and the woman feels safe in the man's presence, then the natural conclusion is, why wouldn't you want to have children? I think that would be a wonderful thing, right? But that's It's hard for people to find sometimes. And I wish everybody could find that. I feel very lucky. And if I reflect on my relationship with my wife, Nicole, we were in the infancy of our relationship as we were figuring each other out. And we were probably together for, 4 or 5 years before we felt that that switch happened within us where we wanted children, because we were babies when we got together. So we were like, we were having too much fun. We're traveling around. Let's go to the Amalfi Coast. And
Yes.
funnily enough, this is too long of a story to get into the details of, but we had a shared psychedelic ceremony together, and we had a shared vision of becoming parents. And we rolled over and looked at each other afterwards and was like, it's time to make a baby. And the rest is history.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Wow.
Speaking of, I know we're coming up on time here, but I would love to just dive into this with you for a few minutes if you're open to it. Just this idea of relationships. And we were talking before we went live about perhaps the most important decision in your life is your relationships, your interpersonal ones, your familial ones, your romantic partners, and things like that. What do you think are some good rules or good principles to follow to either attract that person that you're looking for, or to know if you're in the right relationship or calling in the right relationship? What would you be focusing on? What are you focusing on?
Wow, this is such a good question. So I'll start with the cliche of when you know, as far as being in the right relationship. And I was in a relationship when I was in chiropractic school. It was several years long, and it was my first relationship. So I had nothing to really base it on. And the entire time, I just had this unwavering feeling of, is this right? It just was a question mark, an unwavering question mark all the time. And I think especially for women, like that's not just your intuition, but hormonally, like if you are always having a question mark, that's not safe and secure. And so I think for women, like feeling safe and secure is the number one marker, I think, of being in the right relationship, if it's right or not. And since then I'm now in a relationship where I mean, I don't want to say love at first sight because I know some people don't believe in that, but I knew within a week, I knew like, this is right. This is what this is supposed to feel like. And, and it just happens so organically and naturally. And another thing that I would say is like, I think as women, we do a lot of chasing and we shouldn't. And I don't want to, should on anyone, but I think as women, if you are chasing, I think that that's a really, that is not a good sign. And I don't think that it's our feminine nature to chase. Like even just if you look at conception, like
Mm.
the sperm is chasing the egg. Like that's what's going on here. The egg is just sitting there doing her thing, being in her feminine. And that's what we should do as women. And it's just because also then the question is like, if you are having to put in more effort as a woman, like you should be with someone that is excited to be with you and wants to be with you. And I think I don't know what's going on because I haven't really been in the dating scene for quite a few years, to be honest. But I think there's a lot of behavior for men. I guess this is my time to call out men of like this breadcrumbing and ghosting. I don't even understand these behaviors. Like I don't know where they came from. That just like does not compute to my brain. um, but I think women make a lot of excuses. Excuses for men and the whole like if he wanted to he would, that also gets a lot of heat because people are like, well, you need to communicate your needs and maybe he just doesn't know
Mm.
your needs. But I think at a very like even with friends, like at a baseline, like like if you're ghosting someone or you're not like when you're not treating someone with respect. And so I think yeah, I think women make a lot of excuses. And sorry, I feel like I've gone so tangential from the original question,
Oh no, I
but
love it. It's perfect, and I think we've talked a lot about the women's space and things like that, but we gotta definitely call out the guys here because bros, we gotta do better. Come on, man. It's what I think has happened. This is like quite woo and esoteric, but I think kind of like the polarities have shifted between men and women, where like women have like hyper gone into the masculine and men have become emasculated by that and they've gone into the feminine. So it's flipped the dynamic where men are the ones sitting back now being like, oh, she'll chase me, and the women that have become hyper masculine are like, go get what you want, girl, go pursue. But that's not really like the natural order of things. And then at a deep fundamental, it's like two north ends of the magnet trying to come together, like they want to, but when they get close enough, they they like push each other away instead of like just being more in, God forbid, the natural order of things, which is, like men are supposed to be the pursuers, they're supposed to kind of like have that high vril vitality, testosterone energy to feel that kind of like intimacy and mystery from a woman and want to say like, I'm going to get that and pursue it. And then people get triggered by that language because there's a whole hangover of like me too, and you can't just take what I know. We know, obviously, there's always obvious exceptions. You're not smart by punting out. We're not saying literally go and grab the woman off the street that you want, but pursue her. She wants to be pursued. And if you look at this, there's this cultural crisis going on right now where men between the ages of 18 and 30 that are single, like a large number of them, up to 75%, haven't approached a woman in over a year because they're terrified. And if you poll women who should make the first move, like 80% of them say they would like the guy to make the first move. So you've got this complete like dichotomy that's not matching right now, where guys aren't approaching women, and women want to be approaches, and everybody's sitting there like, what the fuck is going on?
Yes. No, exactly. I think that's so true. And I think, it's no mystery that our fertility rates are plummeting. I mean, I don't know what's going on out there. And I think to tie it back to the whole corporate situation, it's like we are now prioritizing all of these external things over being in right relationship with the human. Like it's just, and in my experience, that is like the most important thing. Like the most fulfilling thing to me in my life right now is my relationship. And I know that that's going to be a hot take, but it's like actually because it is like a divine union. It is, I am serving the masculine. Like it is like my relationship with this man, but also with God, because it's just like us together is the full spectrum of like masculine and feminine and yin and yang. Like how could that not be the most fulfilling thing? Like it is the deepest well in my life. Experiencing sacred union and divine love, like unconditional love, and practicing these things. Like I just, love is, that's the conclusion I've come to, is like love is the meaning of life. And what better way to do that than to be in right relationship with someone, and for me, a man. Yeah.
Love it. Love is all you need. The cliches are true. That's a beautiful place. Beautiful place to bring this one into land. Dr. Marley, tell people where they can go to keep up with your hot takes abound online, and how they could potentially reach out with you, get into your support, etc.
They can find me on Instagram at Dr. Marley Quinn, Dr. Marley Quinn. That's kind of all I'm really pouring into right now. I mean, I am on Substack. I write a few things a month, and it's the same handle for everything. Dr. Marley Quinn.
I liked your recent Substack about the irony of preaching about health online, and we'll leave that as a little cliffhanger for a future episode, because there's so much that we didn't get into today. But I really appreciate this conversation today. I'm happy with where it went, and we got off into all kinds of uncharted territory, but they're the fun ones. So thank you for joining us, Marley, and we'll see you all next week. Have a great one. Peace.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.